is full right now. What a day. So I just came back from BBQs. I got me a little party cup, as they call it. I went to see The Color Purple today, the remake of it. The original came out in 1985, starring Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey. And I'm pretty sure everybody has seen the original, right? But not everyone has seen the remake of it, which came out today. So I got my tickets in advance. I probably purchased my tickets, I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. That's just how I do when it comes to film releases. And I usually actually get free advance tickets to the premiere, to the screenings in advance. But unfortunately, I didn't get the premiere tickets. I wonder where this movie premiered. Most likely probably LA. I wouldn't be surprised, but y'all gotta go see this movie, man. This movie hit so close to home. It was a tearjerker. Like, I felt like I was just a ball of emotions throughout the entire movie, yo. It was really intense. And the movie theater I went to go see it at was at AMC on 34th Street here in Manhattan, New York. I think it was a packed theater. Yo, they did an excellent job. Shout out to all the cast, Fantasia Barrino, Danielle Brooks, Taraji P. Henson, Halle Bailey. Like, they show up and they show all the way the fuck out. I'm telling you. It was so many scenes where I felt like I was just sitting right there with them in the movie, at the table, yo, in the bed with Celie, like, as she was getting, oh my gosh, yo, like, that movie is so intense. So I'm not going to do a long review. I'm just going to kind of touch on a few points, a few themes that I noticed throughout the film. Mainly the intergenerational transmission of racism, right? Internalized racism and trauma. So it's apparent that obviously this movie reflects a piece of our history, right? Being that we are descendants of, slaves, right? Enslaved Africans. And they captured it so well. So, like, seeing, like, the language, because that's one thing I paid attention to in this film, the language, the way in which, they communicated to each other. Obviously, it reflected how the slave masters, or they call it in this film, the overseers, which I'm just like, wait a minute, overseer or slave master? But this film did take place in the early 1900s, so it was post-slavery, but you can still see a lot of the remnants of slavery, right? In terms of how people were treated, the division amongst blacks and whites, it was still there, even though they were quote unquote free, right? Free from the shackles, free from the physical chains. The psychological chains were still very much present. And so, yeah, it's just, it hit close to home. And I feel like as I was watching the film, my mind kind of just reflected on my own closeness with my family, the things that my dad shared in terms of him being a cotton picker when he was a little boy growing up in Tallahassee, Florida. And it's just a reminder of the things that we come from. Because I think for a lot of us African Americans, we done leveled up, right? It's like we somehow are somewhat removed from that past, right? From that experience of being made to feel inferior, being poor, being looked down upon, right? Sometimes we feel like, okay, that was then, this is now, especially when we done leveled up, right? We're doing well for ourselves financially. We have made it up the ladder, the socioeconomic ladder, right? We have developed and attained a level of status, right? In society, it's just like, I think these types of films, I know a lot of people say, oh, here we go with another fucking slave film. Here we go with another, like, you know, back in the day film. Like, why do we need to be reminded of our past? But I think that it's healthy. It's helpful to kind of take ourselves back. Take ourselves back to the past. We need that reminder. And as I'm watching this film, like, I felt so connected to the characters. I saw myself instantly. Fantasia did an awesome job. And I'm thinking even about Fantasia, like how she played this role, given that she somewhat is removed, right, from the actual experience of the character that she played, Silly. But I don't think she had to go too far. I don't think she had to tap in too deep to what it was like in playing that character. Right? It's not too far removed from her own personal history, right? And being stripped of her identity and her sense of autonomy and control over her own body, right? And one of the earlier scenes shows where, you know, she was sleeping with her quote unquote husband that she was sold to. But it just kind of really captured the depth of how a lot of women and Black men were made to feel, right, during that time. Like, they did not have autonomy over their own body, over their own actions. And, like, you can just see the level of degradation and humiliation and insecurity and low self-esteem that emanated from her. And it was just another reminder, like, we have come a long way. And I think much of my tears that formed in my eyes as I was watching this film, it spoke to our level of perseverance, right? It's like, almost like for me, I felt a sense of joy, right? I wasn't so much like in a place of being painstaken or, you know, feeling hurt. It was more of like, wow, we have overcome and we're still here, right? And like the way the delivery of the lines, you know, how she spoke so strong, you know, she was just like, yeah, you know, she was speaking in terms of the negative racial internalized beliefs that have been ingrained in us, right, have been passed down through the generations from the white slave masters, right, that we're ugly and we're inferior and we're inadequate, right, and all of these negative attributes. And she said, yes, I'm all of that, but I am still here. And I'm just like, yes, honey, we are still here. At the end of the day, no one can take that from us. We are still here. We're still strong. And we're never going to give up. So, and it's like, granted, it's been a while since I've seen like the original. That's a throwback. A lot of these films that a lot of people don't really want to watch, right, and open their eyes to, we had to see growing up. Like, we were forced to see, like, in grade school. We saw Roots in elementary school. Right, we saw Color Purple, all of these things like we have been exposed to at such an early age, and it's just amazing to kind of revisit that and to see like in the present moment, right, like who we are today in 2023, to watch this very unique, very special point in time, knowing that this is what our ancestors endured. Like, this is an actual piece of history that people lived. Thankfully, we're not there, though we still have a long way to go, right? All isn't well necessarily, but we have come a long way from that. And I saw myself in like a lot of the characters, even the character that Danielle Brooks played. What was her name? Nettie in the film. And how, like, she was just this very strong, outspoken Black woman, didn't take no shit. And I saw myself in her. I saw myself even in Fantasia Barrino's character, Miss Celie, considering I've been there. A lot of Black women, we've been in that position. That's why I think a lot of us get emotional when we see those scenes where she's being degraded and being abused, practically, right, by her so-called husband, that she didn't have a choice in picking and choosing. You know, it's like she was sold into that position. And it goes to show, like, the timeline of our history as descendants of African people. This is a repeated pattern going back. And it even made me think about how these traditions still stand today in Africa. How women, when you think of it, because it's funny, I went to this market just the other day in Midtown Manhattan, the African Restaurant Week at the Holiday Inn. And as I was patronizing one of the vendors outside, she was a vendor that I bought the African outerwear from, right? And she made a joke to say, "Oh, there's my husband." And she pointed to this man, very beautiful man, clean shaven, who happens to be the founder and owner of that particular event. It's an annual event called African Restaurant Week, right? And she pointed to him, and he approached us, and he looked, and I spoke, I waved, and she was like, "Yeah, that's my husband." And she was like, "Yeah, he still owes me my bride price, right?" Which is, she said, like several cows, right? And I laughed, we all laughed together. But then as I watched this film and to see how Miss Celie was sold into a form of slavery, right? Granted, it was within the race, but it was still a form of enslavement. She didn't choose that. She didn't want to go to be with this man. I think it was her own father who sold her into this dynamic. And to think that this is still happening today. Like, granted, yeah, she made a joke about that, but still, African women, their families receive a bride, quote unquote, price, right? Or, you know, an endowment from the family of the groom. To see how transactional things are when it comes to our African culture, to see that, this goes back many, many, many years, and it's still happening today, where there is an exchange, a monetary exchange for human life. Like, there is no price you can put on my life. And then we bring it to our current context, right? Because, listen, we're not immune as African Americans. As Americans living in society, we're not immune. So to see that also, when we look at the context of capitalism in America, I mean, a lot of people are wise enough to be able to put a name on it to say, yes, this is just another form of slavery. This is modernized slavery when we go into work a 9 to 5. And like, funny enough, I've never really held down a 9 to 5. This is something I've never really done, but I'm doing it now for a short period of time, right? Because obviously it comes with its benefits. I work for the state of New York as a clinical psychologist in a psychiatric hospital, right? So of course it comes with its benefits, but to experience like what it's like to work for someone and to see their level of understanding of your role as an employee working for them. I just finished this training, this crisis intervention training, where it teaches how to de-escalate situations. It's pretty much a refresher training. But in that training, like, the instructor, he's just like, he's telling the class, who was a new group of employees, is like, you work for us, right? So kind of like whatever we say, you have to do. No questions asked. And they were talking about the hierarchy in terms of boundaries, right? And he was speaking of like, okay, there's the patient boundaries and what they expect, right? And then there's the organization boundaries, and then there's your boundaries as an employee. And you were talking about the hierarchy of which comes first. And they said it's the patient's boundaries, right? And what they expect, what they need. And then it's the organization, the hospital in which I work for, the state. And then at the bottom is the employee. So we have to submit to whatever the expectations and the boundaries are of the organization, and they submit to the patient's needs. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? So it's like, set aside what your own belief system is, what your own boundaries are, whatever your own expectations are. Like, set aside that at the door before you come in. I'm just like, it makes you feel like a slave. It's modernized slavery. What in exchange for what? Yes, they pay pretty decent. I make a bit over six figures, but it's just like, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And I definitely understand why people deliberately choose to become entrepreneurs. So that, yes, granted, you probably work a little bit harder, you work more hours, but you have a sense of freedom at the end of the day. So, to make a long story short, this film definitely is worth going to see. Like, when I look around the theater, and of course I'm sandwiched in between two men, and all you hear is like sniffles and people just connecting on an emotional level to the characters and their stories. And even men were crying throughout the film. Like, I tell you, sniffles and tears just falling, not just from the eyes of women, but also from the eyes of men. It goes to show you, like, listen, we do need more stories like this. You know, I understand how people often say, oh, no, we don't, because all it does is just keep us kind of fixated in that time period. It like arrests our development so that it brings us back to a time that we actually matured from, we graduated from, we've outlived, right? We're trying to get away from. But I think on a spiritual level, this is just what I felt. I felt very connected to the characters. It makes me think about one of my colleagues where I work. She's a peer specialist, and she said how when she went to visit Alabama and walked across that bridge, it made her reconnect. Like, she felt something vibrating through her spirit as she was walking across that bridge, right? It like you feel the spirit of the ancestors, and I definitely felt the spirit of my ancestors in watching that film. It almost like pushed me to a point of wanting to do something. It's like, that's what a revolutionary film does. You don't just watch it for entertainment, right? But as you're watching it, like, it moves something in you, and it pushes you to a point of wanting to do something, to act on what you see, what you experience. And I'm just like, man, such a powerful film. I got tickets. So I'm sitting at Dallas BBQ today after I watched the film, and I'm just like talking to this other customer sitting next to me. It was a couple. And this woman and her partner, he had went to go use the restroom. And I'm talking to her, and I'm like, oh, y'all out celebrating the holidays? And she's like, yeah, kind of. Right? And I let her know that I wanted to go see Color Purple. And she was just like, yeah. She was like, I tried to get tickets, but they were sold out. Yes, they definitely were sold out because everybody wanted to go see this. I think it really was the characters. And Fantasia, I think she can sell any movie. Because if you really know Fantasia, know her story, like, you can relate. She's a very relatable person, very down to earth. And so I think any film that Fantasia is in is going to sell, because people know, like, she comes with it. She definitely delivers when it comes to her performance. And so this woman was telling me, yeah, she wanted to go see it, but they were all sold out. And I'm like, listen, I just saw it, and I actually was booking more tickets to go see it this coming weekend. So I'm definitely going to go and see it. I see that the film actually cost $100 million to make. Now, the original in 1995 was only, I think, $15 million. But of course, back then, the dollar was different than what the dollar is today. So, taking into account inflation, how much is $15 million worth? Taking into account, if we were to do the math, $15 million back then is worth how much today? Would it be the equivalent or close to it? But yeah, it's definitely a must go see. And another thing I wanted to point out, what I noticed in the film, it felt like a musical, which I think essentially it was a musical, which I think served a purpose. I'm not really a big fan of musicals, but I think the music in this film played a significant role in balancing out the trauma. Because as you witness trauma, right, like vicariously, it has an impact on you. It does something and it stirs up something in you. And so I think that the music was a helpful release from that and balancing out that visceral reaction that we witnessed and seeing the traumatic things that these characters went through in this film. I definitely appreciated like those songs, and some of the songs I sang to. And you know, me growing up in the South, I'm from Florida, and sometimes people don't want to consider Florida as part of the Deep South, but it is. I mean, set aside Disney World, right? It is definitely part of the Deep South. And so I grew up in a primitive Baptist church where they did feet washing every first Sunday. We got on our hands and knees and washed each other's feet. We kept to the traditional practices of the culture. And like the music was definitely very nostalgic for me. It took me back. And I think it's something about a film that can just take you back to the time period that you grew up in, right? It takes you back even beyond that to a time in history that our ancestors lived through. And granted, as a spiritualist, right, if you're watching this and you're a spiritualist yourself, you know, our ancestral spirit lives in us, right? And so, although, yes, you see me as Danielle here manifested in 2023, right? The voice that speaks through me and the spirit that reverberates through me is the spirit of my ancestors that lived many, many years ago, right? So as that connectedness and seeing this film, it's just like my ancestors living through me and in me right now, connected to the experience portrayed on that silver screen. But you guys gotta go see this film, man. It's definitely worth going to see. I'm going back to see it. And I noticed, like, even with me booking tickets to go see it again this weekend, those seats are filling up. Those seats are filling up pretty quickly. But you guys who have seen it, feel free to drop your comments below. What do you think? I think they did a really awesome job. I think it's not easy to capture the time, the essence of a period that happened so many. We're in 2023. So basically the film captured a time period that happened nearly 100 years ago. So the dress was different. The way they spoke was different. The scenery was different. Everything was essentially different, yo. The way they danced, right? Their interactions from a socio-political context, things were different. The way women interacted with men, the way they spoke in conversation with men, it was just different, yo. When I leaving the film, yo, it's funny because it's like when you're watching a film, a really good film, right, can pull you out of your current context, right, in which we live in and take you back. And so it definitely did that for me. I was taken aback, but then I'm leaving the film and I'm walking out, right, into the modernized society of 2023 in New York City. And it's just like, oh my gosh, the dichotomy of the two different times. It's almost like walking out from the past into this futuristic state, and just seeing the dynamics of relationships between men and women. The way men and women dress, just, oh my gosh, just looking at all these men. I'm leaving the theater and I'm walking throughout the streets of Manhattan, and the men dressed in like skinny jeans and shit, tight fitted jeans. And when you look at women and men who are a partner, you can clearly see that it's the woman that takes the lead, that has more of the dominant role. That wasn't the case back then, baby. That wasn't the case. So Danielle Brooks' character was definitely refreshing to see, even though she did have her setback where she was forced into servitude by this white woman. I think they were at a gas station, and this white woman was like, oh, she wanted her to work for her. And she was like, no, no, I ain't with that shit, right? And just from that, her resistance escalated to a fight. I think she ended up slapping her, and then of course the authorities got involved, and she went to jail, right? And just her kind of being forced into this position of submission and having to give up that dignity that she carried, that level of integrity. It was like so dehumanizing, and that was another scene. Like, it was many scenes, I'm telling you, like it was a line of scenes that it pulled away at my heartstrings, and definitely made me really go into my heart chakra. And I felt bad. I was just like, oh my gosh. And like I said, sometimes we think we're far removed from that, but we have to shake ourselves up to realize, like, yo, we're really not. We have to wake up and to see like the juxtaposition between Danielle Brooks' character and Fantasia. Now, Fantasia, clearly she was deeply immersed in that level of servitude and humble submission and like, yes, master, I do what masters say. But then Danielle Brooks' character was like, hell no. Right? And to see that juxtaposition, it was just like, it spoke to the present day and the times in which we live in, and how there are people that are blind. And some would call them coons, or, some, not even coons, but just kind of ignorant Black people, right? And, are in this position of just acquiescing, right? And doing what the master or the white man, so to speak, expects and demands and says, right? And then there are us, revolutionaries, the Danielle Brooks, who are just like, fuck nah, hell nah. And it's funny because like her character was introduced in the context of her relationship between her and her husband, and how like she was bossing him around. So I thought that was interesting to see how they did juxtapose Fantasia's relationship with her husband. Granted, it was very abusive, right? And she was very subservient to him. Granted that she was kind of bought into that marriage. And then to see, Danielle Brooks, what was her name? Sophia, her character with her husband, and she was the complete opposite. If anything, she was abusing him, right? So it was a flip. It was a reverse. She was like, hell nah. And Fantasia was like, or Miss Silly was like, how do you do that? Right? Like, how are you able to just stand up for yourself, right? And she was just basically like, some of us, we got it, some of us don't. It is who you are. It's your personality. And that's where I connected, because I'm just like, hell, fuck yeah. Never in a million years. And granted, I've been in some situations, but fuck that. Damn that. Okay? I also like the ending too, to see how Miss Silly was able to get some justice. in recompense for the things that she went through, and she ended up getting ownership of her biological father's shop and her land. And that was refreshing to see, and it made me think about my own father and his land. My father is still living, by the way. He's 82 years old. And his house and his land that his house sits on, it just made me think about that, you know. And just it just spoke to the level of perseverance that we have, and it just made me admire the strength of our ancestors, because if that didn't exist and they didn't have that strength and level of resistance and resiliency, we would not be here, right? We would not be here. They chose not to give up. They chose to continue fighting. And granted, our ancestors are not physically here, though they lived through us, but it's just made me appreciate them even more. I'm just like so grateful and so thankful. Just watching this film just was another reminder, like how grateful and thankful we need to be towards our ancestors and the role that we must take going forward, moving forward, and keeping that same energy and resistance and resiliency and not giving up, yo. It was just definitely a film of hope, of transformation, of motivation. So y'all gotta go see it. But I'm about to wrap this video up. I do have to do a follow-up video to an earlier video that I made separate from this. So I will catch you all in the next one. But if you guys did see the Color Purple remake, feel free to share your comments below and let me know what you guys think about it.